Tēnei te aro papatu anuku e tākoto nei. Tēnei te aro rangi rawa ko papa e tākoto nei. Kia rarau te tapuai o tāne ki raro. Tēnei te pō nau mai te ao. Karangatia te ao e piri. Karangatia ko tāne e piri. E tata. Whakamaua kia tīna. Tīna. Ui e tai. Ngā mihi kia koutou katoa. Our breath we extend to share with you all as we come together. I just wanted to introduce the gifts that we're going to be using today. We call them taonga tuku iho. So these are the traditional knowledge systems, the traditional practices that have been passed down from our tupuna, our ancestors. Prayer, music, voice, and we use these in practice. They're not things that sit to be discussed, to be talked about. We actually use them. We use them in our practice, and we'll be using these resources today to help us create space in some of the difficult conversations that we're going to share, to hold space, to hold each other as we're having emotional responses to the kōrero, to the conversation that we're having, and to shift us through space as well. Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou. When we look for transformation, most of us are looking for change, like more money, more people, Transformation involves us. It involves us as people and the way we are with each other. It requires us to shift all of our attitudes, to challenge our worldviews, our attitudes, our stuck, cemented ways of being and thinking. We want to share with you our shift, a way of being that doesn't involve developing new services, bringing in more psychiatrists, bringing in more psychologists, but it allows us, if we are psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, nannies, mums, grandfathers, children, youth, everyone, it involves us being able to learn from each other a way of being with each other. Tēnā tātou.
Kia ora tātou. Tēnā hoki koutou ngā mātā waka kai wana nei a koutou ngā hapu, maha, ngā iwi maha. Koutou anō hoki te tangata whenua o tēnei taki wā o te Yukon. E mihi ana nei mātou kia koutou, i hara mai i te takahi mai ai, te roa o te whenua, te roa te moana kia taitunu mai ai ki runga i tēnei whenua. Nā reira me mihi tunu kāteke kia koutou. A koutou mate, ka mehia, ka tangihia, ka tukunai, i runga i te roi mata, kia haere ai rātou ki te tini te mano o rātou ko marawati a tātou. Mea o mātou nei mate, kai te wā kāinga tunu, e tangihia tā, e mihi ana, e tukunana. I runga anō hoki i roto i te korowai o te rangi kaupapa. Nā reira koutou tēnā hunga haere koutou hoa tuki mua whangai whakarite hoki mamuri nei koutou e whanatu ai. I runga i te kupu kōrero e whakarere mai ai e koutou apeti hono tātai hono moto hia te pitu ia koutou nā i te pō raka waiho hoki kia tātou ki te ao. Nā reira ka hoki mai kia tātou tēnā hoki koutou. Whakarongo mai nā, o mai o koutou taringa, o mai anō hoki o koutou whakaaro kia aro tahi ai ki ene o ngā kōrero, ki ene o ngā whakāturanga, whakātuana i kia koutou i pēhe ai mātou nei te mahi kia manakitia, kia tiekina o tātou tangata i te kāinga. Tēnā hoki koutou, kia ora koutou, tēnā tātou koutou.
Uri au no rānei, hanga hanga no ara, ia hine ahu o me katu, te ringa ringa katu, te wai wai katu, te mahunga. Ka toro mai tōna ure ki runga i te tipu aki e, koi a te tōtai, ka tapatu ki roto te kānohi ko te karu tēnā ki te pōnga iu ko te kea tēnā ki te wahara ina ko te mare tēnā ki te keke rawa ko te riko wera wera ka hangai ki te tara me ko hine manu iri nāna te kaurangi ko hine rau wharangi nāna te wai apu ko hine kapua rangi nāna te pōhatu ko hine a tauira ko ururata nā e he kōrero nei ana o tīpuna ki taumata i te mauria o ngā tāna ko waio ki te rangi ko te maunga, ko ihirere te awa, ko takitimu me horauta, ngā waka e rua, ko te poho maha ki te wharenui, ko te kura maha ki te wharekai, ko Ngāti Kōhuru, ngā te wāhia o kuiwi e, kia ora tātou, ko Bronwyn Williams tōku ingoa. My name is Bronwyn Williams, and I've just introduced my mountain, my river. My mountain is Ahititi, my river is Waihirere. My whare, my big house of my ancestors is Te Poho o Mahaki. And the whare kai, the place where we share kai, share food, is Te Kura a Mahaki. Kia ora tātou katoa.
E rere, wai apu, e rere rā. I te moana, a tā ngaroa, wai apu te awa, tapu te awa o ngā iwi, ngā roe mata o te whenua, e rere rā. My name is Dr. Diana Kopua. I hail from a tribe called Ngāti Puro on the east coast of the North Island of New Zealand. First place, to ever see the sunrise in the morning, you have to come. Harawai, come, welcome. My profession is as a psychiatrist. I am the only Ngāti Puro psychiatrist in the world, and I'm here to support everything that Lucy has said and more. Kia ora.
Tēnā tātou e te whare, ko te aroa tōku waka, ko Ngāti Kia, Ngāti Tuara, tōku iwi, ko te aroa, tōku katoa. Kia ora, my name is Hinemoa, and I'm from a place called Rotorua in New Zealand. We look at our island like a whai, like a stingray, a fish. And so my people are from the Belly. The Belly, we have lots of geothermal activity in our space. That's me, no Rotorua hau. I'm named after one of our most famous, beautiful, coincidentally, ancestresses. Her name is Hinemoa. And I love to talk about Hinemoa, and I'm so proud of my name. She was a pusher of boundaries. She explored, and the stories about Hinemoa, she did things that she was not supposed to do, not allowed to do. She had been put into streams, into funnels to be a particular kind of person, but she pushed boundaries. She swam across a lake, she defied her parents. So I'm really proud of my lineage and my ancestress, Hinemoa. Nō reira, kia ora, Hinemoa.
Kia ora koutou. Ko no te waka o Tainui, no te maunga pirongia, ko Waipā te awa, ko Pūrikiriki te marae, ko Kaipiha te urupā, no te whānau tana, awa ko Uirata, me te whānau Webster me ki, e tuaki nei kia mihia kia koutou katoa. I'm from the canoe Tainui waka. My mountain is Pirongia. My river is Waipā. My marae is Pūrikiriki marae. And the urupā, the cemetery where my mother is buried, is called Kaipiha. And I'm from the Tana family, or Turners, and also the Uirata family on my grandfather's side. And also from the Webster family through my father's English lineage. And I'm a full-time artist, so I do taonga pūoro, traditional Māori instruments, tāmoko, bit of whakairo, and interested in all Māori art as such, and utilise these things in this kaupapa, in mental health and healing kaupapa. So, kia ora rā koutou.
Kia ora hoki koutou. My name is Kopua. I come from 3 tribes. The biggest one is Ngati Pro. The majority of us here, well, 4 of us here are Ngati Pro. But Ngati Pro, I come from 3 tribes, and the biggest one is Ngati Pro. And Ngati Pro sometimes likes to tell the second tribe what and who and when they should do things, and so I get sick of that, and so then I go back to my second tribe, which is Tamatia. And I get annoyed with them because they keep getting consumed into that conversation and argument with the big tribe. So then I revert to the 3rd tribe, which is Ngāti Ira, and it's easier to exist in Ngāti Ira because there's only 7 of us. I come from a place called Māngatuna. My mountain there is, I have a number of mountains, but the closest one to me is Marua, Te Rangi. There's a little creek there, but the river that's there is called Hikuwai, where we caught eels, and hence the name is Māngatuna, which means the eel creek. We caught eels as children, and we, what else is there? There's a couple of marae there. One is just collapsed, it's very old, and the other one is very strong and very new in comparison. And the main, we have a number of really, really important people that came from there, and one of them is just talking to you right now. Kia ora koutou.
Tēnei te mihi atu ki a koutou ko tēnā ngata tōku i mua. He mokopuna tēnei no ngā whānau o Ngāti Pro kei te tai rāwhiti a te ika a Māwi. E mihi atu nei ki a koutou mai i tēnei mokopuna a hikurangi maunga, a Whiti Matarau maunga, a Pātāngata maunga, a Kuki Amaru maunga, ki Ōtini maunga, mai tēnei mokopuna a Waiapu awa, a Awatere, a Kopua Pounamu, a Karakatū Whiro awa, ki a koutou, me o koutou tini awa, mai te rau kūmara, te ngāhere, ki o ngāhere, mai tōku iwi, a Ngāti Pro, ki o iwi nei ka mihi ki a koutou. My name is Tina Ngata, and I wanted to acknowledge first of all the mana of this whenua, the rightful owners who have allowed us to be here. Tautoko ngā mihi ko mihia to support the acknowledgements that our uncle and my relations have already given to the people of this place. And thank you very much also to the organisers and those who have gathered us from near and far to come together and speak to these issues. I work in my home, which is also very remote on the East Cape of Te Ika Māui, which I guess many people would consider being very remote. For us, it's the centre of our universe. And so I live in a remote place, within a remote place, and I have for many years worked predominantly in the space of Indigenous rights advocacy, wellbeing and environmental advocacy as well. And that's taken me on some interesting journeys to the United Nations and other spaces, UNESCO. But the most important work for me is the work with my own people, which is one of the reasons why I do stay where I stay, live where I live. And it has shifted from being predominantly environmental work in more recent years to COVID response. And just acknowledging that, you know, those silos of the environmental well-being and the well-being of our people, our collective well-being and our individual and family well-being, those silos don't exist in our mindsets, and they don't exist in many Indigenous mindsets either. And in fact, that disconnection between those spaces of well-being is a characteristic of the process of colonisation, and so we see the re-indigenisation as a process of reconnection. And I wanted to talk just briefly about, I guess, 3 real characteristics or things that we share from our space where we are in Aotearoa and this space here, and many spaces across the global Indigenous village in particular. You know, we do share waters. I'm mindful, and I sent, actually many of us did, sent our mihi from our mountains, from our rivers, to your mountains and your rivers, your special places, to your people as well. And we also acknowledge the waters of this place as well. I'm mindful that the waters of the Yukon that flow out into Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, the great ocean that laps up against our shores, that brings us healing as well. So we do share those waters and the systems within those waters. It's not, for us, the moana has never been a barrier. It's never been a border, like so many other things that have been put up around us. That's a frame of mind that it's a barrier. It is a highway, it is a connector, it is an ancestor, it is a space of worship. It was a space that actually brought us together, and it was a shared space as well, and still is and can be a shared space as well. It's just one example of some of the many ways in which we are trying to shift back. I don't want to say change, because that was actually the way that it was. One of my mentors also always used to say to me, you know, Tina, I don't like that we call them the conservatives. Actually, it's you and me that are the conservatives. When you think about the length of time, if we were to take the size of the room and look at that as a time frame, the size of the room from this wall to the wall at the very back of the room there, and that's all of time. Colonisation and colonial mindsets have only existed for about this long. And our ways of knowing, being, doing and relating to each other have lasted so much longer. And it's a colonial fiction that we cannot undo that. It's a colonial fiction that we can't return to those mindsets that sought to reconnect us to each other and to place and to time, so that we are very present with each other when we share space like that. And so he used to say to me, you know, it's actually you and I that are the conservatives. We're the ones that are trying to conserve that period of time. And this quite radical idea of needing to separate everybody from everything to say to me is, you know, you can't look at a young man sitting in a prison cell, and I would say this would be the same of a young Indigenous person sitting in a hospital mental health ward, or a child being put into detention, and see them in isolation of the experience of colonisation that their people have been through, which does not absolve them of responsibility, nor does it absolve them or remove their sense of personal agency, but that is the context within which their experience is happening. But colonial systems have never been interested in context. And so I just wanted to acknowledge, as we heard earlier this morning from Lucy, that truth-telling forums are an incredibly important part of our healing process and re-indigenisation. Otherwise, what is the point? Re-indigenising from what? This work, everything that we're talking about in terms of bringing forward the gifts of our ancestors, is only necessary because it's been disrupted in the first place. Otherwise, it would be the innate default within which we are working. So yes, we need to indigenise, but we also do need to decolonise. We need to point out that difference that's needed from the system of old in order to create that space for the system of new. And that is a part of the experience that we all share. When you have a look at, you know, the rates of incarceration, the rates of diagnosis of disorder, the rates of performance or underperformance within colonial education systems, and you compare that across Aotearoa, across Australia, across Indigenous nations around the world, you see the pattern. And there's only two things that can be behind that pattern. One, we're genetically defined and genetically inclined to fail, to be sick, to be mentally unwell, to die early, to be criminals. Either we are genetically inclined or there's something going on with the system. And so what we are saying is that it's not actually just us that needs to heal. the system needs to change, heal, or be completely dismantled. So that is another thing. So that is another point of experience that we share. But thankfully, luckily, we also share an amazing set of gifts and strengths, hidden treasures and hidden gems that we've heard about from the last few days. And they've got demonstrated potential. We know Indigenous peoples account for about 500 million of us around the world. We're one of the world's largest political movements when we come together and share our stories, share our challenges, but also share our strengths. Amazing things happen. You know, in 2017, we already know, I think many people here will probably have heard that within the small amount of land we've been able to retain, and waters as well, our water territories as well, we care for 80% of the world's biodiversity. In 2017, we sunk 10 times the global carbon emissions into Indigenous managed forests. Imagine, and that's just on 5% of our traditional lands. Imagine what we could do if we got all of our land back, not just for us, but for our mother and for everybody on this planet. There's such incredible potential environmentally, but also health-wise. We know that our systems work for our people. We know that it brings together community cohesion and community healing in ways that many Western models can't even really perceive or understand yet. And so, you know, our message that we have here today is to be mindful of these connections that we have, that sometimes the most helpful thing the Western model can do is to just actually get out of the way and let us do our thing. But also that we can't wait for permission to do that, that whilst we analyse, assess, and critique the systems that don't work for us, we must also embody and start to work the systems that we know do work for us. So, I runga I tēnā, he mihi anō ki a koutou. There was a little bit of a kōrero around our Indigenous connections and the value that they bring for everybody, Indigenous and non-Indigenous in this world. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora. A lot of questions about what is mahi a atua. Mahi a atua is a way of being. It's somewhere where we practice as practitioners, as family, as you and me, how we contribute to the problems in society. And it's a foundation of mahi atua are the three principles. Tēnei te pō nau mai te ao, indigenise your space. Bringing in mātauranga Māori as a priority vehicle in order to get us to where we want to be. Unapologetically, and so for that reason we prioritise mātauranga Māori and our artists. The next principle is, if I just elaborate, look, I'm a bit nervous, so let me just be me. I'll just elaborate on that a little bit. Indigenise your space. We do it with art. We do it with wānanga, when we sit together, think together, analyse each other's thinking, our own thinking, and where that comes from. That's how we indigenise our thoughts. And artwork, and of course, we all indigenise our faces. All of us anyway. One of the other principles is ka mā te ariki, ka mā te tauira. How do we remain an active learner in each other's presence? How do we be curious about views, and how do we not shut down conversations? Ka mā te ariki, ka mā te tauira. The third principle for mahi atua is really challenging, but I've heard it in the room. I heard it with Lucy's kōrero and yesterday in the workshop about feedback. How do we, as a person, as a people, receive and give feedback? How are we giving ourselves feedback and reflecting on that, reviewing how we are thinking. Feedback is so important. That's something that Dai has trained us in, and it's like a muscle you have to build for emotional stamina to receive the feedback, but also to give it. Giving honest feedback, analytical feedback is difficult. It's just as difficult as receiving it. So we use practices to open ourselves up to receive and give those things. That's a part, just a small part of what mahi atua is. There are layers and layers. Kia ora.
All right, so, and thank you, Bronwyn. Mahi atua is looked after by an organisation that Diana and I created, but we're all part of that one whole vision. And this organisation we called Te Kurahuna. And in our language, Te Kurahuna means the hidden treasure. And so we, in 2016, although Diana had been using mahi atua for quite some years, in 2016, when we were back at home and working for the DHB, the District Health Board at home, we put this idea to a handful of organizations to nominate individuals to come, and on Wednesday for 2 hours, that was sacred time, nothing else was important, that we would sit and we would look at some of the stories that had been replaced by Cinderella and Pinocchio and all those stories, of our own stories that came from our own atua, which had been replaced by Jesus and God. And we started off with 17 individuals that came from a range of different levels, I guess, of work. There was a GP involved. There was a clerical staff that was involved. There were drug and alcohol counselors that were involved, and there was 16 of us all up. And we were going to review this in 6 months. And when we reviewed it in 6 months with their managers noticed in that period of time a huge lift in output by these people, a new injection of vigor to be involved in healthcare using this methodology that we were feeding to them for 2 hours every Wednesday. And so the feedback said, grow this in this region. And it grew rapidly. And one of the things that told us was that what we were doing was fanning the fire of this hidden treasure inside each of those individuals to get more involved, to be able to take on board critical feedback, to sit at a tabletop level with people that they were working and helping and so forth, and to be more critical and want to perfect and improve every day. So, but not only that, one of the things that we thought was happening here was that people were loving reconnecting with their culture. And the tool of healing became this reconnection with culture. And the understanding of what the stories that our ancestors had that were guidelines and blueprints and templates for how we should relate to one another. And so, because we didn't want the system to take a hold of this and so forth, we created this organization called Te Kurahuna. It's a whare wānanga o Te Kurahuna, which means the storehouse of treasured hidden treasures. And so this is the organization that looks after, just as I said that, the lights started coming on.
No mai tau.
We created this organization so that we could look after these hidden treasures and actualize them, make them a reality, not some academic conversation that we could have around tables. We were going to say that we were going to use these tongapū, these musical instruments, our traditional musical instruments, as a way to get the vibration in a person moving and active. The vibration of the tattoo machine to get vibrations of that human active and moving, and use our culture as a tool to reconnect. And so Te Kurahuna became this conduit that allowed us to reconnect with our past, so that we could use that as the blueprint, as the map to help us navigate our present and going forward. So that's really a nutshell. It's a bigger story than that for Te Kurahuna, but that's exactly what our organisation is of Te Kurahuna. The other thing that we do with Te Kurahuna is that we run training programs. So we've become this professional development agency that helps train and retrain people so that they can rediscover that hidden gem that was there, that fluffiness that was there when they wanted to heal the world, and they got involved and they went to this training that unpicked all that and put a little bit of that flame out, and within 80 hours of work they were plateauing and not necessary, trying to find new ways to heal outside of what they were trained to do and so forth. And so this program that we put together, this training program, which we call a wānanga, helped re-unveil that hidden treasure within each one of them to help heal. So that's some of the activity that we do in New Zealand. It makes it very busy work. Obviously, of course, we've come over here to the Yukon to share at least what we do and show some of what we do, as opposed to having a conversation around a table. So kia ora tata. Thank you.
So picture ourselves in a small community with about 46,000 people. Half of them are Indigenous to New Zealand, Māori, and yet 66 to 77% of the mental health and addiction services are consumed by Indigenous people there, and a predominantly large group of non-Indigenous people come from other places around the world. And some of those people are psychiatrists and sit in very powerful positions inside psychiatry, such that they are called upon for decision making about how the system should transform or reform or stay the same. Many individual psychiatrists who come into New Zealand from somewhere else have big hearts and want to help and have ideas about where the problem sits. Not one of them has ever understood racism as a very big problem contributing to the outcomes of my people in this small community. So moving from 1990, where I was a psychiatric nurse, and using, and many of you have talked about it already, these cultural approaches that really matter, but forever they will be secondary to the dominant system of psychiatry and all the side disciplines. And even though we know that our outcomes are better, we know they make us feel good, they make the people we work with feel good, when that person tries to commit suicide, or you are hugely anxious about this person's severity, which might have lots to do with your anxiety, not necessarily their severity, there's only one carved out pathway, and that is that you must inform the psychiatrist. That's a given around the world, and no one can challenge me on that. That is a fact. So even though we know we're doing well in our pocket, Yvonne doing well in her pocket, the Indigenous communities that we've talked to so far, and ours as well, do wonderful work, we are not afforded the mana, the power, the status to be able to grow that in a way that gets good outcomes. So here I am, I'm a psychiatrist in the Tairāwhiti. I get tapped on the shoulder to be the head of department for psychiatry in my region. And the American psychiatrist is not happy. Dr. Diana is dangerous, right? That's me, I'm the villain now. So picture that. And picture me as, you know, the typically colonised, urban Māori, disconnected in many ways, yearning for a sense of belonging, relationship failure after a relationship failure, always just feeding my mind with how worthless I am. And I go to do nursing so I can contribute and give and show everyone how worthy I am and how kind I am. And I'm not the story that my mind keeps telling me. I'm trying to get a community to convince me that I'm worthy. And I take this idea of being Māori is great. Being a teenage mum is great because I contribute to the next generation. And I'm told that being a teenage mum is not good enough. I'm told that nursing's not good enough. And when I'm doing wonderful things inside the psychiatric system, everyone's looking at the psychiatrist and the psychologist. And I decided I would take 13 years out of my profession and go and get this power to grow this way of being. And it's standing here in front of you. And it meant that I had to step forward in my power and be hated by many. And I would appreciate that today, if there's anything that you don't like about what I'm saying, that you don't like what I'm saying, that you don't feed the part of me that already feels quite worthless. So I'm sitting here, I'm now this head of department, and the American psychiatrist, we've only got 5, he threatens to leave. And we need every psychiatrist. We need psychiatrists. Without psychiatrists, our people would, hang on a second, they are already killing themselves too early. They are doped up to the eyeball with sedatives and major tranquilizers considered helpful for our chemical imbalance that doesn't exist. And we've already started Te Kurahuna, normal, regular people meeting weekly for 2 hours. No real strategy, just relationship and absolute commitment to grow our potential together. And I did not mention race or ethnicity. People wanting great outcomes, stuck and challenged. And so this opportunity, like a carrot dangling, came from the ministry. Fit for future funding, $5 million. We got the lion's share. We weren't meant to have the lion's share, but we got it. And at that time, I was scared to use my voice for a minute as I felt my way in this head of department power. It felt scary, it felt good. I felt very certain about what was needed, which was dangerous in itself, right? But I knew that getting better IT gear, getting more resource, getting more of this and more of that wasn't what was needed. An ideological shift was needed. And we needed to reinstate our Indigenous ways of knowing. And so this service that we developed, after telling you it's not the services that are needed, is called Te Ku Wata Wata. And it's no need to remember it, but the system, the service, was named after a forgotten ancestor, one of our gods, like a customs officer would determine whether you were allowed to go from the physical to the spiritual world. Te Ku Wata Wata. And my husband, with all this, he's like a walking encyclopedia, and as there are less and less of us, we have to treasure these people. And he named the system, he named us as practitioners, Mataora, named after a story that was about a chief, an arrogant, ignorant chief who was not accountable to anyone. And he abused his spirit maiden wife, and for the love, because she left back to the spirit world, he needed to change. And that journey is us. We need to change. This system, we developed Indigenous policies and processes, ways of working and being. We eliminated a crisis assessment, a psychiatric assessment, comprehensive assessment. But if you were a nurse or a doctor and that was your thing, that was your art, then you use it. We weren't abandoning everything, but mainstream became Indigenous. And why wouldn't it, with 77% of disconnected Māori? We reduced coercive treatment by 33% in a year. We reduced youth inpatient pathways by 56%. We reduced all of the deficit statistics. All of a sudden, Māori, who were very clever in not wanting to come into our service because we screw them over, just in case you didn't know, I'm not talking about your heart and the great relationships that you have with the people you work with. I'm talking about the statistics around the world that show that Indigenous people do not access our services. The Indigenous people that die earlier by suicide or other chronic, preventable health problems. I'm talking about them. I'm not talking about you and your goodwill. I'm talking about you in a system that is perpetuating a colonial project. And so we increased access for Māori. We more than doubled it. They walked in the door with their families. But not just Māori, non-Māori loved it. It became the front door, not a choice at that point, a front door. And when you came into our front door, choice was offered to you. Would you prefer those two, or these two, or these two? You would get our bios. Do you want the psychiatrist with the artists, or do you want the two artists? And many of us would think, this woman that's been raped, she shouldn't have a man. She should have someone experienced in rape trauma. We gave her choice. She chose Mark. No bloody qualifications from my camp. And she chose him. And then we measured it using Scott Miller's feedback-informed treatment. Now, although Scott is white, male, American, almost the perfect dominant sort of mould, he's like a reformed psychologist that believes in choice, believes in magic, and believes that community have answers. And psychiatry is forcing us, not individually, but as a big beast together, almost difficult to pull apart, is forcing us to think that we have capacity issues and we need more psychiatric professionals. It's not true. We need human beings wanting to be with human beings. That's what we need. We are all mothers and fathers, and we fail and we succeed. And imagine being with people in a safe space where they were able to give us feedback about what didn't work. We gave you a perfect example with Lucy. With heart, myth hurt me. It's my ancestry, not a myth. The feedback was beautiful, it was received, and Lucy grew. That's what we're after. Te ku wata wata was so fantastic that practitioners became anxious. What about me? It's so difficult. It's like non-Māori became anxious. What about us? And I just said human beings with human beings. And it's almost like, well, we spend years, right, perfecting our art. We spend years thinking that what we have is important, and it is. But there's also a part of that story that is leaving out the rest of the community to contribute as well, and it's us that can change that. Yes, it's political. Yes, it's political. But we started from the ground up, and the moment that I got vilified, is that a word, vilified?
Yeah.
Yep. So the moment I got vilified, I knew I needed to step out of the system and start something different. Because I knew many people were right there anyway doing it. Imagine a psychiatrist out in the system supporting community change, transformation, rather than supporting an indoctrinated way of being and getting lots of money. That was te ku wata wata. We prioritise artists in te ku wata wata, And so bringing Mark in, bringing Bronwyn in, bringing people who had a skill set but didn't know how to be in distress with voice hearers, people who were suicidal, we said, let's learn together. Let's pair up together and learn from each other. And we shared our ancestral stories so that at the front door, you would get a creation story that would reconnect you and your family back to your whakapapa, to your genealogy, to your story that you were disconnected from. And it goes a little bit like this.
Reimagining. Imagine that you're a 9-year-old Māori boy and you and your mum and dad are going to see some people to talk about all the trouble that you've been getting into at school and at home. You're always being told off for not being able to sit still, for being fidgety, for not paying attention. When you're sitting in class at school, the teacher says that you've got ants in your pants. You sit in this room with your mum and dad and these 2 other adults, and you're feeling really stink. You know all the adults are there to talk about you and what's wrong with you. You've even heard a doctor talk once before to your mum and dad about medicine to fix these problems, to make you listen better, to sit still better, to not be such a tutu kid. And then the talking begins, but this time it's not about how to fix you. The other 2 adults have asked some questions about what's been happening, and your parents have done most of the talking. One of the other adults has been drawing pictures on the whiteboard of the beginning of a story about all these atua, all these gods, who were a family and lived together in a very cramped and dark space for a very long time. The story was about how one of those kids got hoha, got angry and fed up with being cramped up so much. Pretty much, there were a lot of them all living in a 2-bedroom apartment, and there wasn't a lot of space. And there wasn't always a lot of food either. And their mum and dad were very strict and wouldn't let any of them go outside of the apartment. One of the kids, one of the atua, one of the gods, their name is Uepoto, who is always curious. And Uepoto is always tutuing and mucking around with things. So much so that an older sibling, Whiro, threatens Uepoto to stop being a hoha, annoying, or else. Just like older siblings always threaten the younger ones. And when you hear this story, you look up and listen. They start talking about how brave and courageous Uepoto is. And you begin to imagine that just for a moment, you begin to imagine, what if? What if Uepoto and I are alike? What if you were brave and courageous and that being curious was a good thing? Because it led them to discover new things and new ways of being. A new way. The hinatore, the light, the potential, the glimmering light. And then best of all, they tell you that you are related to this Uepoto, this God. And that fact just blows your mind. You sit up a bit taller. I'm related to this curious and courageous God. Imagine that.
Kai te pō, te tīmatatango, te waiatatango nātua. Ko te ao marama, ko te ao tūro, ko tihe, mauri ora.
It was in the night that the gods sang the world into existence. Through darkness, through layers and layers and layers of grief and dark and night, all the way through into the world of light.
I take mai te ao I te pō. Te pō nui te pōroa, te pō uri uri, te pō kere kere, te pō tīwha, te pō te kitea, te pō tango tango, te pō whawha, te pō namu namu ki. Tae ao te potahuri atu, te potahuri mai ki tae ao I pepere arangi nui. Raua ko papa tua nuku I reira puta. Ai raua tamariki ngata ne toko rangi nui ki runga. Papatu anuku ki raro. Te pū, te more, te wē, te aka, ke te rea, te wānui e. Te kune, te whē, te kore kore, te pō nui. Te pō, te pōro, te pō ia whia ia papa tuanuku. Kia rangi nui e. Ko tiei mauri o. Ngorangi ko papa ko potokota, ne mahuta ko tangaro ko tā whirima tio ko haumi e tiki tiki. Ko rua mo ko korongo ko whero ko tū matau. Toko nārangi ki runga papa tuanuku ki raro kaupute ki te whaia, ki te ao marama. Tihei, mauri ora. E mihi aki ki o koutou katoa te tangata whenua. Ngai iwi taki taki o te whenua nei. Tēnei te mihi, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ngā koutou katoa anō e tatu mai nei. Nau mai, tau mai, kia whakarongo mai nei ki wēnei o nā kōrero. Rangi rawa ko papa, me ngā oro ko hanga. Nō reira, nau mai, hara mai, tau mai e.
Kopua kia te reo,
tangi, tangi mai. He reo nā tua whakarere. He reo mai oha. I ahu mai te oroko hanga o te ai. taua tēnei, e tau awhi ana, e noho kōpipiri ana. E noho pēnei, taua wāmo, ake, tonu atu.
Yeah, rangi, te tau o taku atu. This is my great love, rangi. Oh, the love between us. Oh, he nui te hihi, te korau I wainga nui a kawa. Oh. Engari e rangi, here are all our tamariki, all our children. They've come, they've gathered to listen to us, for us to model to them. Tēnā rā koutou aku hei mapuna katoa.
Tirohia, ki ngauri ko whāorau. Look at all those tamariki we've created. Hey, hoka, your strength there, Hinemoa. Nō reira. Kararau mai, me tirohi atu, ki tō ukaipo, e rere hua, pūrotu ne. Look how beautiful your mother is. Tino a tāhua.
Kia ora.
Yeah, kararau mai, kei wainga nui, a mama me papai. Aue, 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 oh, taku, taku, ukaipo.
So this is the beginning of a long story about how our world came to be. The separation of Sky Father Ranginui, Earth Mother Papatuanuku, who for so long lived in a delicious, beautiful embrace full of love. As we said, they had many children between them. The children lived in a state of restriction, cramped, dark, confined, and they didn't really like this way of being. They became curious. Uipoto was one of them. They had wānanga, they talked together, and it all came to pass that Tāne Mahuta, the god of the forests, was the one who succeeded in separating the earth parents and creating space, allowing light into the world and life to grow.
Ko tāne mahuta au. Ko hau te atua, o te ngāhere. I te timatanga, I wehe o kumātua, he hai. In the beginning, I was the one, God of the forest, that separated our parents. Why? Ka tai e mātai. Ki te toro atu ngāringa ki te taha katau. Ka toro atu ngāringa ki te taha māu. Ka taia ki te peke peke. Uits. Ki te omoma. To run. Uits. Uits. To walk. It's like Michael Jackson. Uits. Ka tai e mātou. Us children, we wanted to stretch our arms out into the world. Ko te ku, ko tāne mahuta, tāne E toko rangi nui ki runga, papatua nuku, ki raro. Ka puta ki te ao, marama, te ao, ki te ao atea, puatatangi te wanui, te aitanga, atanei.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you, Hinemoa and James. Always so hard to bring voice back in after such a beautiful way of being. But I'm going to do it. So we have a huge team. We have a huge team that come into wāmanga with us. And we also have tohunga who are experts in their fields that koha us beautiful taonga, beautiful gifts for our space. And one of those tohunga is Te Nohotima, and he comes from a place called Tūhoi in Te Aitanga Mahaki, and one of the beautiful gifts he's given us is taku whare wānanga. And it's a practice we go through to check in with our internal university. Spots that we check just to see if they're open, if they're closed, if they're open and ready for learning, or if they're closed, and to be curious about potentially why they're closed. What is the resistance to the learning right now? And it's okay to be resistant as long as we acknowledge that it's there. So we're going to go through this beautiful taonga that Papate created. I'll go through the actions and some of the kōrero to it. I'm going to ask Hinemoa and Dai to come up and do the actions with me. And I'll pass on to them some of the whare, which are houses, so our internal houses. Siri's not invited. So we're just going to go through some of our whare kōrero, and I'm going to start with taku whare wānanga, my internal house. Whare tōpito ira atua. This is the foundation of who I am, my values. Yes, go.
Isn't this where they get to move?
This is the great thing about mahi atua, the second principle, ka māti ariki, ka māti tauira, combined with hongi te whaiwhaia, receiving feedback in order to take to and practice. So, e tū tātou, if you can all stand, we're going to go through it together. I can feel an eye roll at the back of me. Okay, so here we go. Taku whare wānanga.
Taku whare wānanga.
Whare tōpito ira atua.
Whare tōpito ira atua.
This is my foundation. My values are held here. I'm just doing a check-in. How am I feeling in that position? Diana, can you do whare ngākau?
Whare ngākau ira wairua.
Whare ngākau ira wairua.
Whare ngākau ira wairua is a house, a conceptual house where I get to think about the things that I do on a daily basis. Do they reflect what I value at a fundamental level. Hapai?
Whare whatu manua, ira tangata.
Whare whatu manua, ira tangata.
The whatu manua is me checking in with my emotional self. Everything, what's triggering me, what language is being used that's triggering me, how free, how open is the door to this whare, am I able to push past what's triggering me and come and be an active learner in the conversations that are being had.
Whare tipuna, whare hinengaro, ira tipuna.
Whare hinengaro, ira tipuna.
This is the house of my ancestral knowing. All the things that I don't know how I know, that come from my ancestors in their teaching. Die.
Whare waha, ira whenua.
Whare waha, ira whenua.
I grow what I speak. What I speak, I grow. I need to be careful and deliberate about the words that I use that promote the ways of knowing from where. That's the question. Whare waha, ira whenua.
Whare tangata, ira ariki. Whare tangata is what we refer to in our language as the womb, the birthing place. And ariki is a chief, a chieftainess. So this whare is us plugging into, are we allowing ourselves to be our ultimate ariki? Are we allowing ourselves to be the best version of ourselves when it comes to birthing words, birthing ideas? Are we showing up in our ultimate ariki selves in our most chiefly manner?
Taku whare wānanga.
Taku whare wānanga.
This is my house of learning. Right, we're going to go through that again, but this time we're going to do it without words, and we're going to make it a breathing exercise. So think about those whare as we go through them, as we move our whare up our tinana, up our body. Think about, acknowledge those spaces, and think about if they're open, if they're closed, just acknowledgement. Ka pai? Here we go. Taku whare wānanga. Who'd like to do that one more time? Anybody? Let's do it. One more time. No words.
We're going to go into something quite heavy now. It would be really good if you turn to the person next to you and have a 1-minute conversation, so that's 30 seconds each, about what resonated with you about that exercise. This is the how to. Ka pai? 1 minute.
20 seconds.
Okay, if you haven't changed over, change over.
Five seconds.
Thank you all.
James.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for bringing your voice into the room. We know that we're time restricted, but how wonderful that you got to share your ideas with someone, and we hope over the day that we'll be able to hear some of those messages. Ngā mihi nunui kia koutou katoa. Anei he. No, just watch.
I can't walk straight, and I'm sick to my gut. Maybe it's something I never ate. Maybe it was the taro held in leathery hands that guided me here through old seas to new lands, held in her belly a gift from Hawaii, the taste upon my ancestral tongue that would have been a reminder of their continuity in me. I have a stone in my shoe and I can't go on. I hear you say you want to fix me with a solution never meant for me, formaldehyde fixed versions of me, forlorn, pickled, measured, sitting on shelves, objectified, observed, preserved in your solution, crafted by Kant, Locke, and Descartes. But did you stop to think that maybe you're in this bell jar with me? And sure, looking out through this crystalline colonial curvature, these self-described bearers of enlightenment may have all the answers, like breeding us out of existence with theories of blood quantum that reduce me to a walking pie chart, like the question of whether I'm even human coming down to the color of my skin. The Enlightenment period was made to lighten you, period. Darwin, 1872.
When civilized nations come into contact with barbarians, the struggle is short. New vices are highly destructive. Those who are most susceptible to its destructive influence are gradually weeded out. And so it may be with the evil effects from spirituous liquors, as well as with the unconquerably strong taste for them shown by so many savages.
So hear me out. It's wild, savage even, I know, but maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe I'm a native grown perfectly poor in a garden of weeds. Maybe my toxicity is the fruit of the same seeds planted by colonial universities, and we keep getting told we'll deal with that later. Don't play the race card, don't look back, just walk on, just walk on. But my brother just walked off the edge. And I ain't taking another step because I got a damn stone in my shoe. Stop looking at me like I'm the problem waiting to be solved, like my land was waiting to be sold, like my ancestors were waiting to be vanquished, like their children were awaiting colonial mischief, like we ain't already had 500 years of being told we're the problem, some kind of dark manifest destiny existing for you to come save me, awaiting enlightenment by European philosophies rooted in a doctrine of discovery, created to legitimize slavery, a tool to erase our native divinity. Desurara, 1450.
And so the native African lot was now quite the contrary of what had once been, in that at home they lived like beasts, without any custom of reasonable being, so they had no knowledge of bread or wine, or shoe or cloth, and only knew how to live in bestial sloth. But as soon as they came to this land, and men gave them prepared food, their bellies began to swell, and for a time they were ill, until they were accustomed to the nature of the country. But some of them were so made that they were not able to endure it and died. But as Christians, they were very loyal and obedient servants, without malice.
Here, maybe it was something I ate, or maybe it was the lies that they fed to retain me as a loyal and obedient servant to the colonial economy, to contain me in a box shaped like a reserve, a land block, a prison cell, a hospital ward, a movie screen preserved in your formaldehyde solution at that exact moment of invasion, forever exotic, forever subdued, forever subjected to a colonial gaze, not your dusky South Sea maiden, not your lovely hula hands, not your savage haka peep show. Did you know that cultural appropriation of our moana was initiated in the brothels of London, and we've existed within Euro imaginations from then till now as sexually available commodities, there to be taken as they please, our ancestress deities stripped from our collective memories. But I hear her calling me to sing her back, to say her name, to chant her words again. It's time. I got a stone in my shoe, and maybe that stone is you. And maybe we need to heal together, you, me, and our mother. She who has carried all ancestral truth through time, let us share that truth like taro upon our tongues, weeding out the colonially cultivated self-blame. Take what has been dismembered and remember ourselves with the cadence of ancestral prayer. Let the tonal salve of Hineroka Tauri seek out the pain of generations and draw it from your marrow back into the belly of she who holds us all. Let's resculpt. Let's renew. Let's radically rejoice in who we are and who we have always been destined to be. Seeds of chiefs sown in the belly of gods, the sum total of the interwoven love of thousands. Aramaya no hine te iwiwa, aramaya no hine rau whārangi, aramaya no ke kere wai. Let's reimagine our full rematriation to our waters, to our lands, to our plans for joyous, thriving futures. Let us defy colonial timelines and expectations and surrender now to the pull of Hina, Mother Moon, aligning our cycles to rhythmic tides and familial migrations, and listen, feel, see, hear, sense, and be present with our whole beings to make sense of the universe again and reset our trajectory here, now, on our own terms, in our own time, and re-emerge proud, whole, marked, healed, and healing, stepping into our roles as good ancestors, continuing their stories and starting ours afresh, for nothing is ever lost in this never-ending series of new beginnings. Let us offer ceremony back to what has been taken for granted. With each breath, honour the inhalation of Sky Father, again becoming one with Earth Mother in a constant cycle of life within you. Each breath, a gift of their reunion, remelding the negative and positive within your whare wānanga as oxygen, blood and flesh. Rangi nui, wai nui, papatu a nuku. Offer thanks to sacred water who carries Sky Father aloft to his love, a cooling nourishment for your inner ecosystem, clearing the way for your righteous voice to reach the sun-salving joints that have borne the weight of injustice for too long, pre-saturating your fully weeded garden for the replanting of native medicine, cleansing our bodies, our minds, our spirits, beckoning us internally to the external water cycles that connect sky, sea and land. Tuia i runga, tuia i raro, tuia i roto, tuia i waho, tuia te here tangata, ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao. Above, below, within, without, becoming one, becoming whole, becoming present. Dihei, Mauri, Ora.
This is Hinepu Te Hui. She is the goddess of the gourds. And when the sky and the land, the Earth Mother, the Sky Father were being separated by the siblings, Hinepu Te Hui grew her long, soft tendrils and covered Te Ukaipo, our Earth Mother, in a blanket and a cloak of calm, of love, of peace. So Hinepu Te Hui is a vessel for peace.
Nau mai e Hinepu Te Hui, ai tō reo, he reo, hauora nei e. Kia marino i tōku ai arua, e oranga ki te iwi e. Come unto me, Hine pute hue, your breath of life. For you cometh the Spirit unto the people, give life. Unto the people, give life. Ahine pute hue. Ahine pute hue.
Kia ora no tātou. Kia ora kōrua, hā tāhua hoki, so beautiful. I'm just going to shift us a little bit into what is called the maramataka. Now, Ricky Solomon is a mataora, and he's a tohunga in teaching us about the moon phases and our traditional time methods of keeping time. I won't profess to know heaps about it, but I know it's pre the Gregorian calendar, which was named after Pope Gregory. Was it Gregory a Pope? I believe he was. And so Ricky's bringing us back into the traditional knowledge of it. So we're going to go through the main moon phases, and I'm going to try and do it from Canada. Well, from Canada, but from the Yukon, which is opposite to New Zealand. So this could be a little bit upside down for me, but let's give it a go. E tū tātou, let's all stand up and let's try it. Yes, the moon is upside down in Canada.
To us.
So the first phase we're going to start with is fetal, and this is the action. Fetal. So fetal is a time where the sun and the moon follow each other, and so the night is in complete darkness. You won't see the moon because it is following the sun. So this is also an atua, one of our gods, called fetal. And then from fetal we come up to Tamatia, which for Canada is this side. Yeah, Canada is this side. So we're going to have a swooping arm, which means the moon is smooth on the right-hand side in Canada in the time of Tamatia. And this is the action. So you're going to bring this one up, and it's Tamatia. And then we go into Rākau Nui, which is the time of the full moon. So it's very visible in the sky. At this time, they're called the Rākau phase of the maramataka. And then we go into, this is a high energy time, brings in high energy, the full moon. Next, we're going to go into the phase Tangaroa. And Tangaroa is our atua of the sea, our atua of the sea. And so what a good time to go fishing. And wait. How do I fish normally?
Fish backwards.
Fishing backwards. So fishing in Canada. Oh, like this. I got it. All right, so this is Tangaroa. Good time to be near the water, on the water, cleansed by the water. Tangaroa. So that's that moon phase. So let's try it again in Canada. Alrighty, here we go. Whiro. And we're going up to Tamatia. And then Rākau Nui, which is the full moon. And then we're going fishing. Yeah, in Canada. Catching some salmon. One more time. Let's go. Just so I can sort of grab it. Selfish, I reckon. Let's go. So, whiro. And whiro is one of our atua, and represented sometimes as an evil bit of a god, but you know, whiro has great purpose, and I guess to whiro has great intention. So this is whiro, and the next one we're going up to Tamatia. Tamatia is, we have an atua that sits in this phase. We have two actually, and one is called a tāwhiri mātia. Tāwhiri, during the early battles of the separation of the parents, tāwhiri mātia did not want to separate the parents and became enraged. So enraged that tāwhiri mātia ripped out tāwhiri's eyes and threw them to the sky and waged war on siblings. Tāwhiri mātia we know as our atua, our god of the winds. Tāwhiri mātia is in Tamatia. Yeah, good time. Thanks, Dai. So this shape here represents that it's a time of uncertainty, a huge time of uncertainty, and a good time to be indoors together, checking in on each other. How are you doing? Checking our taku whare wānanga, our whare wānanga, and the whare wānanga, the learning houses of our whānau, our family, to see how they're all doing. And then from here we're going fishing. Tangaroa. Tangaroa, the atua, our god of the sea. Tangaroa, huge mass of water that helps us to shift. Who's been down to the water, down by the sea, to the moana, and sat there when you're not feeling good? I've done it many times with people of the sea, and just to sit there, Dai and I both do waka ama. It's just so refreshing to be on the water, to shift our mindset, to shift where we're sitting. That's tangaroa. Okay, let's do it fast, one more time. Okay, whiro, let's go. Tamatia. Rākau nui, and tangaroa. Alrighty, that's me. Well, actually, e noho tātou, please sit down. I'm just gonna, I've written a little something about my own moon phase, and it's my story. And I might, you know, I'm a little bit anxious standing here telling my story, and I might discombobulate, and I'm okay with that, because the point is to tell my story, and for me it's really important that my voice is heard, and many voices like mine are heard. So here we go. If I break down and cry, feel free to cry with me. I know a psychiatrist. So this is called Cycle of Time. I remember when I was a kid, I was scared, really scared of the man in the moon. Scared that the man would follow me home and watch me, always watching me. My big sister would close the almost paper-thin blind that I knew, but I knew he was still there watching. I would cuddle up to my big sister and try not to cry, squeezing my eyes as tight as possible and holding my breath so the man in the moon couldn't see me, couldn't hear me, couldn't catch me, making myself invisible. And if he couldn't, then neither could the man that hurt me under the blankets in the cover of night. I'd be safe, but I wasn't. Even though the moon was bright, I was in te pō, the darkness. Internal darkness, chaos, blind from fear, aligned with the moon phase of Tamatia. The atua, the god of this time, is tāwhiri mātia. Tāwhiri in chaos, in anger, blind with rage, and maybe like me, fear. Ripped out tāwhiri's own eyes and added to the chaos in the world, much like I did, I do. The waxing moon, Tamatia. Reminds me of the early battles. There's another one of our beautiful stories. As it does, change happened. From teen to practicing adult, the moon no longer bothered me. I'd forgotten about the moon. The moon, and unaware of my environment and disconnected from myself, just like the two generations before me. Life was energetic and playful, full and bright, reminiscent of the rākau phases of the moon, swollen and bright with masses of potential, but still Te Pō sat in the backdrop, violent and angry, energy in and around me, unsafe practices to reinforce in my head that I was worthless. Darkness remained in the light, still in the early battles. Time keeps moving, and at 51, sitting in the phase of Tangaroa, the atua god of the sea, the huge massive energy that shifted me and continues to shift me, cleansing, watching, shifting the old beliefs I had of myself, reconnecting with myself, my environment, my grief, through traditional knowledge that I'm learning and that I have so much to learn about and that I'm practicing. I know I'm safe, I am me, and the moon is not a man at all, but I've learned as Hinemoa, a female energy. Hinemoa, so beautiful in the sky. I am her, and she is me. The cycle that happens in me every month aligns with her, Hinemoa. Review, readjust, reframe. Whiro has arrived. Whiro has arrived, a time to be together, to reflect and to remember what has been and what was challenged, what worked, and to prepare the plan for the future. Smooth down your dress, let the crumbs fall, and step into you. Kia ora. That's a little paku story about my cycle and my learning, my Indigenous learning, my old new learning of our Indigenous ways of being, to heal myself and to be who I'm meant to be. Kia ora.
Okay, kia ora everyone. I've got 4 messages, 4 times 3, 3 in each of the 4 messages. Just a little bit of the statements that have driven our way of being. The first involves the things that inhibit societal progress. The first is individuality. When we work as practitioners individually in a room with one other, it's invisible. We cannot critique it. Our implicit bias, our unconscious bias, cannot be checked. Now, it could be by the family member in your presence if they are courageous enough to push through and give you feedback. But how you respond and how they imagine that you might respond will determine whether they give you the feedback to grow you. So individuality in our kaupapa, in our initiative, means that we have to work as a collective. We cannot work individually. That's challenging, right? Particularly in our system. The second factor that inhibits societal progress is meritocracy. Many of us have grown up with this dream that if you work hard enough, you too can achieve like I did. It's not true, and the statistics will show you. How many of us tell our kids, go to school, learn, you'll get a certificate, then you'll go to university and you'll get a certificate and then you'll get a job and you'll do well. It's not a fact for Indigenous and black people. It's not a fact statistically, not about me individually, but about us as a community. In fact, we are more likely to fail in school, to fail in university, and once we do get a job, we actually get burnt out because we're fighting for a space for our way of being to matter. So meritocracy we have to be careful of, not just as a practitioner, as mums and dads, as grandparents. Like if you have family who are struggling, we have to understand the historical injustices that have led to that struggle, and not just for Indigenous people, because our Indigenous knowledge is not accepted, it's impacting all of us. The third inhibiting factor is ahistory. And these three ideas, concepts, come from an black American, Dr. Kamara Jones, who's worked in the area of racism as a public health physician for a very long time. She talks about allegories, political stories to help us shift and understand these problems. Ahistory, we understand that we're in the lands of the Indigenous people of the Yukon, but when we're with families in distress, we're not plugging in to why they are presenting like this at a historical level. We are not willing, because it's uncomfortable, and I'm not talking about you as individuals, I'm talking about those people that design the systems within education and justice in the social sector and all of our sectors. It's so uncomfortable that we're not talking about the history to inform us of a way of being. And it's going to be uncomfortable. You heard it in the poetry. It's uncomfortable. But without us engaging in a conversation about the history that has led us to be the way we're being, then we will not change as a society. That's the first one of four. The second one of four is unequal treatment in a health system. There are three factors that we need to look at. It's like three circles. Let's use these three tables. We're very good at looking at the first factor that contributes to unequal treatment, and that is the patient factors. We think about they can't come and see us because they've got a job and they might lose their job if they take time off work. Patient factor. They might not be able to afford getting here. It's like 3 hours away from their home. They can't afford petrol. They can't afford a babysitter. We're really good at thinking about the patient factors that don't get them to the door. The other two are the areas that our space focus on, practitioner factors. Many of us go into institutions with our big hearts wanting to contribute, but we are going to learn within a university, and a university in this system is a place where they are the knowledge makers, knowledge holders, and knowledge disseminators, all of the Western paradigm. And so what happens is that the tohu that you get, the certificate, the registration that you get, has actually been at the expense of learning other knowledge systems. And so what happens is that you are indoctrinated into a racist curriculum. And so that wasn't your choice, but you wanted to help your community, and that's the knowledge that you had to learn and then use inside the already sick system. Sounds a bit depressing. Wait, there's more. So, as a practitioner, when we look at the practitioner factors that contribute to the problem, when we look at what it is about what I think, what I feel, the way that I am with you, those factors and unequal treatment need to be investigated by no one else but you. The systemic factors is the third factor that contributes to unequal treatment in a health system. The systemic factors are our policies and practices. All of those force you, even, I know many of you are here because you don't necessarily agree with the way it is, but it keeps you there. Systemic factors are perpetuated by practitioner factors. So although you're stuck, you are also that gem to change. Those are the three factors that contribute to unequal treatment. Now I'm going to talk to you about, is that all right? Am I going too fast? It's just that I gave them all the time, which is how it should be. Down with the psychiatry power, up with the community power, right? So I have to do this fast. So lucky it's recorded. The three conditions that contribute to transformational change. Think of it as an upside down, oh gosh, I'm making you think of circles and now triangles within the circles. So think of yourself as an upside down triangle. At the top, we're looking at structural change when we want transformation. We look at things like policy and practices and resource flows. And they're all explicit, they're structural, you can see them, you can do them. But if you just focus on that, if you just focus, Cam, on a position statement, then it's not sustainable. It will not be sustainable. So we go down to the second layer of the 3-layer triangle and we look at relationships and power dynamics. I think Dr. Lucy Johnston talked about it beautifully. We have to understand the way of being with each other, our relationship with each other. Many of us think it's always over there, I'm great, I'm good at othering, it's the boss's fault, it's the husband's fault, it's the government's fault. How do we all contribute to the problem is an exciting space to be when you give up resistance. Hapai? The problem with that is that our relationship and our power dynamics are driven by the pinnacle of the triangle. And the third condition is our mental models, our assumptions, our worldviews, our beliefs, ingrained in us at a cellular level. How the hell do we change our mental models, particularly if our whare wānanga is closed up? We have to be able to recognise when we are shutting down to the conversation, be able to acknowledge that this is how I feel in this type of conversation, to investigate where you were triggered by what in your past has led you to shut down right now, and then to be able to non-identify with your way of thinking, your way of feeling, and your behaviour. Non-identification means I am more than my thoughts and my feelings and my actions. They do not define me. I can be greater than the current way that I am thinking and interacting because I have been influenced by so much past hurts. Kapai? Right, that's 3 or 4 I think I'm doing very well because I remembered those. So the fourth one, I want to say the F word because I'm like struggling with the fourth one. We should make it up. I'll hold that space, we'll make up the fourth one. But because I can remember another set of 3, I'm going to repeat it. Mahi atua is a philosophical way of being for us as Indigenous people of New Zealand. We have trained over 500 people so far in the last 2 years to be mataora. They are school teachers, they are grandmothers, they are artists, they are doctors, they are human beings that if we can courageously say, yes, we need to Indigenise our space, and of course you're going to have questions like, but I'm non-Indigenous, can I Indigenise it? How do I do that? Have the discussion. Many white women in our country, not many, one. Typical psychiatrist, I'm going to generalise this. One white woman in our country said, I realised how ignorant I was. I didn't even know the songs you were singing. And I thought, well, how are you going to? And she switched radio channels from a white stream to an Indigenous radio station. And that was the way she Indigenised your space. And if you already know how to greet in the language of those people who are owners of this land, that's great. But how do you forge even further? And that's the exciting part where you get to be creative. No one should tell you how to do this. No one but you. Indigenise the space you occupy. The second, ka mate ariki, ka mate tauira. I, as a psychiatrist, am an expert in some things, but when you're in my room, you're the expert of how you feel, you're the expert of your story, and I am nothing but a learner in your presence. And I'm shit scared that things that I might offer you might actually do more damage than good. Because sometimes I harm you, and sometimes I help you. But if I don't create a safe space that acknowledges how powerful you are, then how the hell is this going to help me and my profession from undoing the damage that we've done historically, perpetuating racism and the colonial project? Ka mate ariki, ka mate tauira. I can grow if we create spaces to sit in the discomfort together and tell our stories about what we're responding and reacting to. The third one is hongi hongi te whaiwhaia. It comes from one of our tribe's proverbs, and it goes like this. Ignorance is the oppressor. Vigilance is the liberator. Know the enemy, and know and grab hold of your destiny. Hongi hongi. Oh, I want to do the Māori, and I'm almost. Am I going to do it? Our principle is hongi hongi te whaiwhaia, and I'm having a mind blank. I'm really anxious thinking about getting this right. You got it? Ka warea te ware, ka aria te rangatira, kai au te mā nehurangi, kai au te rangatiratanga. Hongi hongi te whaiwhaia, kai au te rangatiratanga. I'm sweating. Because it matters so much to me, I don't want to get it wrong. But I quite like being vulnerable in your presence. Those are the three principles of mahi atua, a philosophical way of being that has liberated me as an individual human being, me as a Māori woman who's never felt good enough, always felt worthless, always fighting others, fighting my own sense of worthlessness. And this is me standing in my absolute power. Greeting all of you, and a big greeting and mihi to the Indigenous people of these lands, and also to mine, who have joined our kaupapa and shared with you their amazingness. We went to Daisleen to meet the Daisleen Kwan. If you don't know, I learned how to say Teslin properly. See, that's indigenizing my space in your space. Trying really hard and maybe getting it wrong. Looking for the stern looks that I might have got it wrong. And we met Catherine. And we met Wilford. Two youth workers indigenizing the spaces they occupy. Taking on the challenge, the much needed challenge, like many of you in the room. And we really wanted to mark, and Mark is our Māori tattoo artist, and we wanted to share symbol and ritual with you. And so Catherine agreed to be moko, to have a kirituhi on her skin. We call it moko if it's on our skin, and kirituhi if it's on a non-Indigenous person. And there you have, for non-Māori. And I hadn't really thought about how we were going to finish. I don't know if we're going to do a song with the guitar. I think we are, yes. You might want to turn the mics off.
Let's just play this.
Tell us, Catherine?
Probably be better to.
Well, it would have meant something for you, right?
Yes. Okay, how do I do this? Hello. So here we have, where is it? There we go. So, there we go. Kataskai Yukatua Koptan Ayakhat Daisling Kwan Yatki. My Tlingit name is Kataskai. I'm part of the Raven's Children, and I'm from Daisling Kwan. Big Lake people. So right here we kind of have, okay. As you can see, I'm part of the raven's children, so it kind of looks like a raven's head here. I left this all up to the artiste over here, and he just thought of this design on the spot. So we have kind of like a raven's head, and then here is the river. And because I am Daisy Kwan, we're Big Lake people, so he put our waters in there. And then we have our mountain, our Kleinachtoe that we have in Teslin, that's the big Aces mountain. And then I'm part of the Raven's children, so there's the raven's feathers there. And then this is a Maori symbol called Koru, which means regrowth. And then he put these teeth inside the mountains here, which is another Maori symbol that symbolizes protection, that kind of symbolizes that this here, I'm protected by my waters, my people, my mountains, and who I am. So there you go.